perfect example of why it is so important to have a whole phase. Go be a hoe. Be a hoe. But be a safe hoe though. Like protect yourself and why it is so important.
This would have went through a 304 phase. Now, what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree? Let's see what she has to say. Hit that like button for me.
Ayesha Curry is a perfect example of why it is so important to have a whole phase. Go be a hoe. Be a hoe. But be a safe hoe though. Like protect yourself and don't get pregnant. That's why she's sitting over there feeling trapped. Trapped with Steph Curry. Sometimes you gotta go through some stuff to really appreciate what you have. She probably ain't never been hoed. She probably ain't never been drugged through the mud by a dude. She probably never been. She probably never had a heartbroken time and time and time again. That's why she can't really appreciate what she has because it's like, I need something edgy. I need something fun. Like this mom stuff. This being married to Steph Curry, this shit is boring. And now she's really rebelling. She wanna be in the streets. She wanna be desired by other men. She probably wanna do something with another man because she probably never experienced that. Like when did they get together? Like high school or something? That is not enough time to be out in the world and do stuff and experience stuff. Like you don't have to experience a whole lot. But I don't think she experienced anything at all. And now she's tied down, married with kids. You can't go do your thing right now unless you go do your thing and run the risk. Like, you ain't just no Lucinda from down the block. You're Ayesha Curry. If you go mess with anybody, trust me, we gonna know about it.
So, as you hear, like, people think that I'm somehow, of course, some of the emails are, oh, you hate black women, you hate women, and things like that. No, I'm just showing what they say. That's all I'm doing. So, with this being said, in a way, I kind of do blame Steph Curry, but in a way, I kind of don't blame Steph Curry. So the reason why I blame Steph Curry is that perhaps he should have saw the signs early on, even when he was in high school, even when he was in college. Perhaps he should have been a little bit more astute and more meticulous in seeing her behavior. You understand? But I don't blame him because he was probably focused on his craft. He was probably tailoring his craft so he can be where he is in the NBA right now, you know? So perhaps, I don't know, maybe perhaps his family, did not let him know this is what you should be expecting and this is what you should be looking after. However, maybe she even played a chameleon role. Maybe she even did that. But by her accounts, she was not attracted to him. She didn't really like him per se. I guess you can say maybe he grew on her. I don't know. But the issue is that he should have been more aware of her ways. And by him being more aware of her ways, he would have been probably safer from her. Now, another thing about this whole situation is, of course, you have women defending it. Of course, you have women defending these things. To be honest with you, the thing is about the woman in the West is that while they do not necessarily like each other, they will agree with each other on certain things in which they align in. For example, the moment like a woman gets married, the moment a divester gets married, the other pro divestors are going to cheer her on. The moment a guy dates out and gets married, then of course you're going to hear her And her friends, her banshees say, "Oh, we didn't even want him anyway. We didn't want him anyway. She took him off our hands." You hear that narrative. So with these things being said, we have to look at it from the standpoint that, believe it or not, what this woman would want herself, the one who just said this, her setup probably would be that, okay, I have like a big baller type dude, but I get to step out on him, basically, just judging by how she talks. And that's what I think the majority of women want in the West, is like a big guy who supports them financially, but then they step out on him. They say, you know what, I'm just going to step out on him. This is boring. Although he's funding and financing my lifestyle, it's still boring. So let me step out on him. Even Steph Curry helped Ayesha Curry build her, her enterprise. Monetarily, he helped build her enterprise, but still, I guess that was not good enough for her. Now, another thing that needs to be said about this is that, unfortunately, there was this one woman, she was Akeisha, of course, a very combative one too, like a lot of them are, who said that every woman has a HOE face. She said that herself. And then, when I said that, for example, this was back in the day when I was intending to get married to one person, but it didn't work out for whatever reasons. But I mentioned a dowry. I said, yeah, I'm paying a dowry for her. They started laughing. They started saying, like, oh, you're buying your wife and this, that, and the other stuff. And I'm like, well, this is showing that basically I'm going to protect and provide for her. And wouldn't a woman like that, instead of being dug out and kicked to the curb? It was basically Keisha's who were saying these things. Now, the thing is, too, with the problematic episodes with them, is that I would say a good 99% of them think like this. A good 99% will, have this kind of opinion, basically. Now, in Aisha Curry's case, she can't even control she can't even control herself, basically. For some reason, most of them find it exciting, and most of them find abuse appealing for some reason. I don't know why, but they do. They find abuse appealing. They find that, hey, this is love language and what have you. For some reason, they like this. I don't know why. But I'm not telling guys to do that, especially if you're Muslim. I'm not telling you to become that. I'm not telling you to become what it seems like Ayesha Curry wants, being the future archetype. And what I mean by future the rapper archetype. Because even when you look at another athlete, Russell Wilson, you can see that Sierra, deep down inside, wants what she once had when she was, doing other things with Future, I think Bow Wow, and also I believe Amari Stoudemire, and I believe 50 Cent as well. So with this being said, Steph Curry, I mean, the problem is, this is the issue. But then, even then, she wouldn't be able to step out. But the problem with Steph Curry, I think, is he can step out, but he runs the risk of child support, divorce, losing half of his stuff, or even more than half of his stuff. The problem with Steph Curry is that he can't present an ultimatum. Whereas in the Islamic context, what I would do, me personally, if the Islamic context could apply in a situation, but it cannot, what I would do is I would basically get a second wife. I would be like, okay, well, since you're not satisfied, obviously, and I'm not doing enough, my cash flow is that I can have a second wife or third wife or a fourth wife. I will do that. I will still give you your rights. I will still take care of you and things like that, and give you everything that you are entitled to as a wife. But I will not, I will just, let you be, so to say, while still taking care of you. But unfortunately, he can't do that. You know what I mean? He doesn't have that luxury of doing that. Now, you look at, for example, I'll give you an example. You look at Giannis Antetokounmpo's wife. With him, he found a unicorn. Okay, he really found one that is, on with his program. The crazy thing about her, is he's a Nigerian, we know, a Greek of Nigerian origin, let's just say that. But he found a unicorn because of the simple fact that she is not on talk shows embarrassing him. As a matter of fact, she's pretty much in the cut, and she supports him. She supports him a lot, versus what Ayesha Curry is doing with her husband. So with Giannis, though, I think it was just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, although he's Christian, but Allah takes care of the Christians, and he takes care of even these evildoers. He takes care of everybody. But I think with him, Allah aligned up the cosmos for him to have that unicorn. But what I'm saying about her, though, is, and to be honest with you, when you look at, and I'm not trying to check out another man's wife or other men's wives, so to say. When you look at her, she has a different aesthetic than Ayesha Curry. And I think, it doesn't look like she has work done. Ayesha Curry, I think she does get work done, if I'm not mistaken, to try to look the part, So, with these two contrasts, and, Giannis is sprouting them out when it comes to the kids. With these two contrasts, it just goes to show you the difference. Probably the 0.01% of women in the West that you will find that is going to actually be to your benefit, is going to raise you to a higher standard. Because even, for example, I'm going to just give an example. When you look at Giannis Antetokounmpo, as sad as it is, there are women in the comment section, Keisha's, who are talking about his wife, unfortunately, talking about how she looks, things of that nature. Whereas when they're in the comment section of Ayesha Curry, they're saying, "Oh, you go, girl. You do this. Period," as they say. It shows you that no matter what, even if they say, "Oh, we're not all like that," even if they say, "Oh, that's not true. Who hurt you?" They're proving it time and time again that it is true. Now, I want to say one last thing. When you look at the trajectory of both players, Steph Curry, he had a good little run. Golden State, they were winning a lot of stuff. You know, they tried to bring Jimmy Butler, but he didn't really help nothing. But they haven't been winning lately. When you look at Giannis Antetokounmpo, like with to his defense, he doesn't really have anybody in Milwaukee. Let's just be real. He doesn't. There's really nobody there to help that man in Milwaukee. Let's just keep it a buck, keep it 100. But this summer, he at least was able to win a bronze medal in the FIBA Euro basket championships. Germany being first, Turkey second, him being third, Greece being third. And when you watch that, you see his wife cheering in the stands. Okay? His wife is an example of a wholesome woman. Okay? Versus Steph Curry's wife, who unfortunately is a harlot hiding in a wife's clothes. So I think when you look at these two things, and I'm going to end on this note, I want to land the plane. When you look at the Keishas, they support Ayesha Curry. They support divesting, even if it's to their own detriment. And when I group in Keishas, I'm not only talking about Keishas, I'm also talking about, unfortunately, Halimas as well, who have unfortunately decided to be indoctrinated with this. And Awas too, and whatever other female Muslim name you can think of. When you look at the unicorn, the 1.01%, they tend to be quiet.
And so, there's a level.
They tend to be quiet. They tend to be not wanting to be in the gender war because they know they'll come under criticism if they lead the women the right way. And they tend to be behind the scenes of their husbands for the most part. You saw it with many guys. You see it with many guys throughout various sports. You see that person is behind the scenes. Okay? Their wives are behind the scenes, the ones who are usually successful. When you look at, for example, these Keishas, they will look at Steph Curry and be like, "Oh, he has to basically touch the moon." But then when it comes to, like, let's say Travis Kelce, who only spent like maybe $100 on Kayla Nicole throughout their relationship, that's enough. And the same thing would apply to Giannis as well. The same thing would apply to Giannis. they would still demand the same thing of Giannis. I want to point that out.